The morning sun peeked through the windows of Atlanta Regional Medical Center as Keisha Johnson hurried down the hallway, her comfortable white sneakers squeaking against the freshly polished floor. She was running a few minutes late for her first appointment, something that rarely happened in her 5 years as a physical therapist. Her dark curly hair was neatly tied back, and her bright blue scrubs stood out against her smooth brown skin. "Morning, Dr. Carter." She called out cheerfully to one of the regular doctors as she passed by, her arms full of patient files. It was just another Tuesday morning in April, or so she thought. Little did Keisha know that this ordinary day would change her life forever. As she approached room 315, Keisha quickly reviewed the file of her new patient. Marcus Thompson, age 32, construction worker, spinal cord injury from a workplace accident 3 months ago. The details were sadly familiar to her. A scaffolding collapse had left him with limited mobility in his legs. She took a deep breath, put on her warm professional smile, and pushed open the door. What Keisha didn't expect was the sound of laughter coming from inside the room. A man in a wheelchair was telling an animated story to the nurse, his hands moving expressively as he spoke. When he turned to look at her, Keisha found herself staring into the warmest brown eyes she had ever seen. "You must be Miss Johnson," Marcus said with a bright smile that seemed to light up the whole room. "I was just telling Sarah here about my crazy morning adventure getting here. Would you believe my wheelchair got stuck in the elevator, and this sweet old lady tried to help by pushing me with her walking stick?" Keisha couldn't help but laugh. Most new patients were nervous, scared, or even angry during their first session. But Marcus was different. Despite sitting in a wheelchair, he had an energy about him that seemed to defy his circumstances. "Please, call me Keisha," she replied, setting down her files. "And I hope the walking stick rescue mission was successful." "Oh, it was, though I think I gave that poor woman more exercise than she bargained for," Marcus chuckled, his eyes twinkling with mischief. As Keisha began her initial assessment, she found herself drawn into easy conversation with Marcus. He told her about his life before the accident, how he worked his way up from apprentice to site supervisor in construction, his love for basketball, and his volunteer work teaching woodworking to kids at the local community center. "Now I'm learning to see life from a different angle," he said, gesturing to the wheelchair. "Quite literally, actually. Did you know the view of the sky is amazing from down here?" His positive attitude struck Keisha deeply. In her years of working with patients, she had never met someone who could find beauty in such a life-altering situation. As she helped him through the initial exercises, she noticed how he approached each challenge with determination and humor, even when things were clearly difficult. "You know what's funny?" Marcus said during a break, wiping sweat from his brow. "Before the accident, I never would have met someone like you. Sometimes I think life has strange ways of putting the right people in our path." Keisha felt her heart skip a beat at his words, but she maintained her professional composure. There was something special about Marcus Thompson, not just his resilience or his sense of humor, but the way he seemed to see right through to the heart of things. The session went by quickly, and before she knew it, their time was up. As Keisha helped Marcus schedule his next appointment, she found herself looking forward to seeing him again. She tried to push away the unprofessional thoughts creeping into her mind, reminding herself that he was just another patient. But as she watched him skillfully maneuver his wheelchair toward the elevator, throwing one last smile over his shoulder, Keisha knew in her heart that Marcus Thompson would never be just another patient. Something had shifted in her world that morning, like the first rays of sunrise breaking through clouds. On her lunch break, Keisha couldn't stop thinking about Marcus's infectious laugh and the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. She pulled out her phone to check his file again, telling herself he was just being thorough with her new patient. Deep down, though, she knew this was the beginning of something unexpected. Something that would change both their lives in ways neither of them could imagine. 3 weeks after their first meeting, Keisha found herself looking forward to Marcus's therapy sessions more than any other part of her day. She tried to keep things professional, but there was something about his smile that made her heart beat faster. Other nurses started to notice how she would light up whenever he rolled into the therapy room. One Tuesday afternoon, Marcus waited until the end of their session to ask the question that would change everything. "Keisha," he said, his hands fidgeting with the wheels of his chair, "I know this might be against the rules, but would you like to have coffee with me sometime? Not here in the hospital cafeteria, but at a real coffee shop." Keisha's heart jumped, but her mind raced with worries. Dating a patient was complicated. What would people think? What would her family say? But looking at Marcus's hopeful face, she knew she couldn't say no. Yes, she answered, surprising herself with how quickly the word came out. But maybe we should wait until you finish your therapy sessions with me next month. Marcus's smile could have lit up the whole hospital. I can wait, he said. I'm pretty good at being patient now. His joke made them both laugh, breaking the tension. The next few weeks seemed to crawl by. Finally, after Marcus's last official therapy session, they had their first date at a cozy coffee shop called the Bean Counter near the hospital. Keisha wore a pretty yellow sundress, and Marcus had on a crisp blue button-down shirt. They talked for hours, sharing stories about their families, their dreams, and their fears. But not everyone was happy about their relationship. When Keisha told her mother about Marcus, Mrs. Johnson's first response was worry. Baby, she said, sitting at their kitchen table, are you sure about this? Taking care of someone in a wheelchair is a big responsibility. Don't you want an easier life? Keisha felt her temper rise. Mama, Marcus isn't a responsibility. He's a wonderful man who happens to use a wheelchair. He takes care of me just as much as I take care of him. Meanwhile, Marcus was fighting his own battles. His best friend Tommy visited him one evening, bringing pizza and concern. Man, you know I love you, Tommy said, but are you being fair to Keisha? She's young, beautiful. She could have anyone she wants. Marcus stared out his apartment window for a long moment. That's exactly why it means so much that she wants me, he finally said. She sees me, Tony, not the wheelchair. Me. Despite the doubts from others, their love grew stronger. They discovered they had more in common than they first thought. Both loved old movies, spicy food, and had the same silly sense of humor. Marcus taught Keisha about woodworking from his wheelchair, and she helped him discover new ways to stay active. One day, while they were having a picnic in the park, a little girl pointed at Marcus's wheelchair and asked her mother loudly why that man couldn't walk. Instead of being embarrassed, Marcus called the girl over and showed her how his wheelchair worked. It's like my very own race car, he told her, making her giggle. Keisha watched him with tears in her eyes, falling in love with him even more. 6 months into their relationship, they faced their biggest challenge. Marcus hit a low point during a difficult physical therapy session at his new clinic. He couldn't complete an exercise he'd been working on for weeks. When Keisha tried to comfort him, he snapped, "You don't understand what it's like. Maybe your mother was right. You deserve someone whole." Keisha took his face in her hands, forcing him to look at her. "Marcus Thompson, don't you dare. You are whole. Different doesn't mean broken. I love you, wheelchair and all." Those words marked a turning point. Marcus's determination grew stronger, though Keisha didn't know he had secretly started a new therapy program. He began spending more time at a different rehabilitation center, telling her he was attending support group meetings. She noticed his arms getting stronger, but thought it was just from regular exercise. As their love deepened, Marcus started thinking about the future. He bought a ring, but he also had another surprise in mind, one that would have to wait for their wedding day. Every time Keisha talked about their future first dance as husband and wife, he just smiled mysteriously, keeping his incredible secret safe until the perfect moment. Marcus sat in his wheelchair at the Advanced Rehabilitation Center of Atlanta, sweat dripping down his face as he gripped the parallel bars. Dr. James Chen, his new physical therapist, stood nearby, watching his progress carefully. It was 6 months before the wedding, and Marcus had a dream that seemed almost impossible. "Are you sure we can do this?" Marcus asked, his arms shaking from the effort of pushing himself up. "The wedding is in 6 months, and I can barely stand for 10 seconds. Dr. Chen smiled confidently. "With these new robotic leg braces and your determination, I believe you can do more than just stand. You might be able to sway a little, enough for a short dance." He paused, then added, "But you understand this has to stay completely secret from Keisha, right? Any hint could ruin the surprise." Marcus nodded, thinking about how hard it was keeping this from his fiancée. Every time Keisha asked about his frequent support group meetings, he felt guilty for not telling her the truth. But the thought of her face when he stood up at their wedding kept him going. Mrs. Johnson, Keisha's mother, was the only one from their families who knew about the plan. She had surprised Marcus by becoming his biggest supporter after seeing how much he loved her daughter. She helped cover for him when Keisha got suspicious and even contributed to the expensive robotic leg braces. "My baby girl deserves magic at her wedding," she had said when she handed him the check. "And you, Marcus Thompson, are going to give it to her." The training was harder than anything Marcus had ever done. Each session left him exhausted and sore. The robotic braces were complicated to use, requiring him to learn new ways of moving his muscles. Some days, he wanted to give up, especially when he fell. One particularly tough day, Marcus crashed to the mat for the 5th time. Frustration bubbled up inside him as he punched the mat. "This is useless," he shouted. "I'm going to fail in front of everyone, in front of Keisha." Tony, his best man who had been helping with the secret training, rushed to help him up. "Man, remember why you're doing this," he said quietly. "Remember that look on Keisha's face when you first told her you loved her. Imagine her face when you stand up for that first dance." Those words gave Marcus new energy. He grabbed the bars again, pulled himself up, and tried once more. This time, he managed to stay standing for nearly a minute. As weeks passed, Marcus made slow but steady progress. The robotic braces became like a second skin. He learned to shift his weight, to move his feet in tiny steps. Dr. Chen modified the braces to look less obvious, designing them to fit under his wedding pants without showing. The hardest part was keeping the secret from Keisha. One evening, she noticed the bruises on his arms from falling during practice. "Baby, what happened?" she asked, worry in her voice. "Are these from transferring to your chair?" Marcus hated lying to her but managed to smile. "Just been trying some new exercises at the support group," he said. "Nothing to worry about." What Keisha didn't know was that Marcus was also taking dance lessons, sitting in his wheelchair with another physical therapist who specialized in adaptive dance. They worked out how he could transition from his chair to standing, using a specially designed walker that would be decorated to match the wedding flowers. 2 weeks before the wedding, Marcus had his final rehearsal with his whole support team. Dr. Chen, Tony, and Mrs. Johnson watched as he rose from his wheelchair, took 3 small steps with the walker, and swayed gently to "At Last" by Etta James, the song chosen for their first dance. Mrs. Johnson wiped tears from her eyes. "My Keisha is going to fall in love with you all over again," she said. That night, as Marcus lay in bed, he imagined the moment over and over. He could picture Keisha in her wedding dress, waiting for their first dance. She would expect him to stay in his wheelchair, as they had discussed. The DJ would play their song, and then... Marcus smiled in the darkness. All the pain, all the falls, all the secret practices would be worth it for that one perfect moment. In just 2 weeks, he would give Keisha the surprise of her life, showing her and the world that love truly could make miracles happen. The morning of the wedding arrived with perfect spring weather. Sunshine streamed through the windows of the Garden View Hotel, where both the ceremony and reception would take place. In the bridal suite, Keisha sat at the vanity mirror while her sister Lisa carefully placed tiny white flowers in her braided updo. "Stop fidgeting, girl." Lisa laughed as Keisha shifted in her seat again. "These flowers need to stay in place all day." Keisha couldn't help it. Her stomach was full of butterflies. "I just want everything to be perfect," she said, smoothing her hands over her white dress. The dress was beautiful, a flowing A-line gown with delicate lace sleeves that would allow her to move easily when she danced with Marcus in his wheelchair. Mrs. Johnson watched her daughters from the couch, holding back happy tears. She knew something Keisha didn't, and keeping the secret was getting harder by the minute. Every time Keisha mentioned their planned wheelchair dance, Mrs. Johnson had to bite her tongue to keep from spoiling the surprise. Meanwhile, in the groom's room, Marcus was getting ready with help from Tony and his brother James. They had arrived extra early so Marcus could practice one final time with the leg braces, hidden beneath his black dress pants. "You've got this, bro," James said, helping Marcus with his bow tie. "Just remember to take it slow and steady, just like in practice." Tony carefully checked the decorated walker, which was waiting in a storage room near the reception hall. It looked beautiful, covered in white roses and ribbons that matched the wedding decorations. No one would guess it was anything special. As guests began to arrive, the hotel's garden filled with the sound of excited voices and the soft music of the string quartet. The ceremony space looked magical, with white chairs lined up on the green lawn and an arch of flowers marking the spot where Marcus and Keisha would say their vows. At exactly 2 o'clock, Marcus took his place at the front, his wheelchair positioned perfectly under the flower arch. His heart was beating so fast he could hardly breathe. He wasn't just nervous about the ceremony, he kept thinking about the surprise that would come later. The music changed, and everyone stood as the bridesmaids began walking down the aisle in their pale blue dresses. Then the wedding march started playing, and Marcus felt tears fill his eyes as Keisha appeared on her father's arm. She was breathtaking. Her dress seemed to float around her as she walked, and her smile was brighter than the sun. Mr. Johnson pushed Marcus's wheelchair forward a few feet so he could meet them halfway, a gesture that touched everyone watching. "Who gives this woman to be married?" the minister asked. "Her mother and I do," Mr. Johnson answered, his voice thick with emotion. He placed Keisha's hand in Marcus's, then stepped back to join his wife. The ceremony was beautiful in its simplicity. Keisha and Marcus had written their own vows, making everyone laugh and cry. When Marcus promised to be not just her husband but her partner in all of life's adventures, Keisha had to wipe away tears. "I don't care if we dance standing up or sitting down," she said in her vows, not knowing what was coming later. "I don't care what challenges we face. I choose you, Marcus Thompson, every single day." When they exchanged rings, Marcus's hands trembled slightly, but not from nervousness. He was thinking about how those same hands would help him stand for their first dance in just a few hours. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister said with a warm smile. "You may kiss the bride." Keisha leaned down slightly as Marcus reached up, their lips meeting in a perfect kiss while their guests cheered and applauded. As they broke apart, both laughing and crying at the same time, rose petals showered down around them. They led the wedding procession back down the aisle, Keisha walking beside Marcus's wheelchair with her hand on his shoulder. The photographer captured beautiful shots of them against the garden backdrop, with Marcus's wheelchair decorated in matching flowers and ribbons. As they took photos and greeted guests, Marcus kept checking the time. In just 2 hours, they would have their first dance, and everything would change. Looking at his beautiful new wife, he couldn't wait to see her face when he stood up and made their wedding day even more magical than she imagined. The reception hall buzzed with excitement as guests finished their dinner. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, casting a warm glow on the white and blue decorations. At the main table, Keisha sat next to Marcus, both of them glowing with happiness as they finished their wedding cake. The DJ's voice came through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for the moment we've all been waiting for, the couple's first dance." Keisha's heart fluttered. They had practiced their wheelchair dance many times, and she knew it would be beautiful. She stood up, smoothing her white dress, ready to follow the routine they had planned. "And now," the DJ continued, "Mr. and Mrs. Thompson will share their first dance to At Last by Etta James." Marcus squeezed Keisha's hand and whispered, "I have a surprise for you, my love." His voice shook slightly with emotion and nervous energy. Keisha looked at him, confused. This wasn't part of their plan. She noticed Tony and Dr. Chen moving quietly to stand near them, and her mother was wiping tears from her eyes before anything had even happened. The soft opening notes of At Last filled the room. Marcus pressed a hidden button on his wheelchair, and Keisha heard a soft whirring sound. Her eyes widened as she noticed something changing in Marcus's legs. "What's happening?" she whispered, her heart beating faster. Marcus smiled up at her, his eyes shining with tears and determination. "For the past 6 months," he said, his voice trembling, "I've been working on something special for this moment." Tony stepped forward with what looked like a decorated walker, covered in the same white roses and ribbons that matched their wedding theme. Keisha's hands flew to her mouth as she began to understand what was about to happen. The wedding guests fell silent, sensing that something extraordinary was about to take place. The only sound was the music and the slight mechanical wear of the robotic braces hidden under Marcus's pants. With steady movements practiced hundreds of times, Marcus released his wheelchair brakes. His arms tensed as he gripped the walker, and Dr. Chen stood ready nearby, though he knew Marcus wouldn't need his help. "Baby, what are you doing?" Keisha's voice was barely a whisper, tears already streaming down her face. Marcus took a deep breath. This was the moment he had worked so hard for, fallen so many times for, kept secret for so long. With incredible strength and determination, he began to push himself up from the wheelchair. The room collectively gasped as Marcus slowly rose to his feet. The robotic braces supported his legs as he carefully straightened up. his hands gripping the decorated walker for balance. After months of practice, his movements were smooth and controlled. Keisha stood frozen, her hands still covering her mouth, tears flowing freely down her cheeks. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. Her husband, who she had never seen stand, was now at eye level with her. "Surprise, my love," Marcus said softly, his own eyes wet with tears. "I wanted our first dance to be special." Mrs. Johnson was openly crying now, holding Mr. Johnson's hand tight as they watched their daughter's dream come true. Even Tony, who had helped Marcus practice for months, found himself wiping away tears. The other wedding guests were a mixture of shocked gasps, happy tears, and amazed whispers. Many had their phones out, recording this incredible moment. "How?" Keisha finally managed to ask, reaching out to touch Marcus's face, as if making sure he was real. "With a lot of help, love, and these amazing robotic braces," Marcus explained, his voice thick with emotion. "I've been practicing for months, keeping it secret, wanting to give you this moment." Dr. Chen stepped forward briefly to adjust something on the braces, ensuring they were working perfectly. Marcus stood tall and proud, ready for the next part of his surprise. "Mrs. Thompson," he said, extending his hand to his bride, "may I have this dance?" Keisha nodded through her tears, unable to speak. As she stepped closer to her husband, the entire room held its breath, watching this incredible moment unfold. The real dance was about to begin, and it would be more magical than anyone could have imagined. The music seemed to wrap around Keisha and Marcus like a warm embrace as they stood facing each other on the dance floor. Etta James's rich voice filled the room, singing at last, "My love has come along." The decorated walker provided steady support as Marcus took a small step closer to his bride. "I've got you," Keisha whispered, her hands gently finding their place, one on his shoulder, the other holding his free hand. Her touch was tender, careful, yet filled with all the love in her heart. Marcus smiled at her, his eyes never leaving hers. "Just like we practiced," he said softly, though Keisha hadn't known about any practice. The robotic braces hummed quietly beneath his pants, helping him maintain his balance as they began to sway. The wedding guests watched in awe as the couple moved together. It wasn't the kind of dance you'd see on television. There were no fancy spins or complicated steps. Instead, it was something far more beautiful, a dance of pure love and determination. Mrs. Johnson clutched her husband's hand, remembering all the secret practices she had witnessed. "Look at our baby girl," she whispered through happy tears. "Look at how happy she is." Marcus and Keisha moved in small, gentle movements, finding their rhythm together. The robotic braces helped Marcus shift his weight from one foot to the other, allowing him to sway with the music. Each movement was carefully planned, practiced over countless hours, but to everyone watching, it looked natural and graceful. "I can't believe you did all this for me," Keisha said, her voice trembling with emotion. A tear rolled down her cheek, but her smile was radiant. Marcus lifted their joined hands to wipe away her tear. "I would do anything for you," he replied. "Dr. Chen and the team helped me train for months. Some days were really hard, but thinking of this moment kept me going." As they danced, Marcus told her about the secret therapy sessions, the falls, the frustrations, and the triumphs. He explained how her mother had helped keep the secret, how Tony had stayed late after work to help him practice, and how the whole rehabilitation team had worked together to make this moment possible. "That's why you had all those bruises," Keisha realized, remembering the marks she'd seen on his arms. "And all those late support group meetings." Marcus nodded. "I hated not telling you the truth, but I wanted this to be a surprise you'd never forget." The other couples on the dance floor kept their distance, forming a circle around Keisha and Marcus, giving them space for their special moment. Many guests were recording videos on their phones, knowing they were witnessing something extraordinary. Halfway through the song, Marcus felt his legs getting tired. Dr. Chen had warned him about this and taught him what to do. "Hold me a little closer," he whispered to Keisha. She stepped in, supporting more of his weight as they continued to sway. Lisa, Keisha's sister, wasn't even trying to stop her tears as she watched them dance. "This is better than any romance movie," she said to anyone who would listen. "This is real love." As the song continued, Marcus and Keisha forgot about everyone watching. They forgot about the months of secret practice, the robotic braces, and the decorated walker. In that moment, They were just a husband and wife, dancing together for the first time. You know what this means? Marcus said softly, his forehead touching Keisha's. This is just the beginning. With these braces and more practice, we'll have many more dances together. Keisha's heart felt so full it might burst. I love you so much, she whispered back. Not because you can stand or dance, but because you're you. Because you never stop trying, never stop surprising me, never stop showing me what love really means. The song was nearing its end, but Marcus had one last surprise. With careful movements, he lifted their joined hands and helped Keisha into a small twirl. It was a simple movement, the one he had practiced for weeks to perfect. As she spun back into his arms, the wedding guests burst into applause and cheers. Their first dance wasn't just a dance, it was a testament to love, determination, and the power of never giving up on your dreams. As the final notes of At Last faded away, Marcus and Keisha knew they had created a moment they would remember for the rest of their lives. The morning after the wedding, Keisha and Marcus woke up to their phones buzzing nonstop. Lisa, Keisha's sister, had posted a video of their first dance on social media, and it was spreading like wildfire across the internet. Oh my goodness, Keisha gasped, scrolling through her phone. The video already has 1 million views. People from all over the world are sharing our dance. Marcus propped himself up in the hotel bed, still tired but happy from the previous night's events. What are they saying? He asked, curious about the reactions. Keisha read some of the comments aloud. This is what true love looks like. This couple just showed us that nothing is impossible. I'm crying at my desk at work watching this. Their love story gives me hope. The local news station called first, asking if they could interview the couple whose wedding dance had touched so many hearts. The national networks started calling. Everyone wanted to hear their story. Should we do it? Keisha asked Marcus, holding his hand. Share our story with everyone. Marcus thought about all the people who might be inspired by their journey. Yes, he said firmly. If our story can give hope to others, we should tell it. A week later, they sat in their first television interview. Keisha wore a beautiful blue dress, and Marcus sat proudly in his wheelchair, though he had brought his robotic braces to demonstrate how they worked. Tell us about the moment you decided to do this, the interviewer asked Marcus. I wanted to show Keisha and the world that love can make impossible things possible, Marcus explained, his voice strong and clear. Every fall, every struggle during practice was worth it to see her face when I stood up. The interview cut to clips from their wedding video. Viewers could see the exact moment Keisha realized what was happening, her hands flying to her mouth in surprise. They watched as Marcus rose from his wheelchair, supported by the decorated walker and special braces. Letters and emails started pouring in from around the world. A mother wrote about her disabled son who now believed he could dance at his own wedding someday. A man who had recently lost the use of his legs found new hope in Marcus's determination. Dr. Chen's rehabilitation center was flooded with calls from people wanting to know more about the robotic braces and adaptive technology. The doctor used this attention to raise awareness about new developments in mobility assistance. Companies that made mobility devices reached out to Marcus and Keisha, asking them to be spokespersons. They carefully chose partnerships that would help make adaptive technology more available to people who needed it. One morning, as they had breakfast in their new apartment, Keisha found Marcus looking thoughtful. What's on your mind, honey? She asked, sitting beside him. I've been thinking, he said, taking her hand. Maybe we could start a foundation, help other couples like us get access to technology and therapy they need for their own special moments. Keisha's eyes lit up. That's a wonderful idea. We could call it the First Dance Foundation. They worked with lawyers and business advisors to set up their nonprofit organization. Their viral fame helped them raise money for other couples facing similar challenges. The foundation worked to provide grants for adaptive technology and therapy services. 3 months after their wedding, Marcus and Keisha attended the first wedding they helped make possible through their foundation. They watched from the audience as another couple shared their own magical first dance, the bride and groom moving together with the help of adaptive technology. Look what our love story did, Keisha whispered to Marcus, squeezing his hand as they watched the couple dance. And this is just the beginning, Marcus replied, thinking about all the other couples they would help. That evening, in their living room, Marcus put on their wedding song again, using his braces, which he now practiced with regularly, he stood up and held out his hand to his wife. "May I have this dance, Mrs. Thompson?" Keisha stepped into his arms, just as she had on their wedding day. As they swayed together to Etta James's voice, they knew that their love had created not just one magical moment, but a ripple effect of hope and possibility that would touch lives for years to come. 1 year after their magical wedding dance, Keisha and Marcus celebrated their first anniversary in the same hotel where they got married. The Garden View Hotel had given them a special suite, complete with a framed photo of their first dance on the wall. "Can you believe how much has changed in just 1 year?" Keisha asked, sitting next to Marcus on the balcony. They were watching the sunset, just like they had done after their wedding reception. Marcus smiled, thinking about their incredible journey. Their First Dance Foundation had helped 20 couples so far, providing grants for adaptive technology and therapy. Each success story added to their happiness. "Remember Angela and David's wedding last month?" Marcus said, referring to the most recent couple they had helped. "When Angela saw David stand up from his wheelchair, she had the same look you had on our wedding day." Keisha laughed softly. "No one can ever have exactly that look of surprise. You kept that secret so well." She paused, then added, "Though I still can't believe Mama knew the whole time." Mrs. Johnson had become the foundation's biggest volunteer, speaking to families and helping coordinate support for couples who needed help. Her initial doubts about their relationship had transformed into fierce advocacy for couples facing similar challenges. Marcus had continued his therapy with Dr. Chen, getting stronger every month. Now he could use his robotic braces for up to an hour at a time. He and Keisha had even started taking adaptive dance classes together every Saturday. "Want to practice our new dance move?" Marcus asked, reaching for his braces. They had been working on a simple waltz step for the Foundation's upcoming first anniversary gala. As they danced slowly on the balcony, they could see the garden where they had exchanged their vows. The flower arch was still there, though now it held different flowers for another couple's upcoming wedding. "The hotel manager told me they've had 5 other couples with mobility challenges book their weddings here," Keisha said. "They all saw our video and wanted their own special moment in the same place." Their wedding video had now been viewed over 50 million times. It had been featured on major news networks, talk shows, and even inspired a documentary about adaptive technology and wedding celebrations. But more importantly, it had started conversations about love, determination, and breaking down barriers. Marcus's construction company had hired him back as a consultant, specifically to help make their buildings more accessible. He worked from home most days, using his experience to design better spaces for people with different mobility needs. Keisha had reduced her hours at the physical therapy clinic to help run their foundation. She worked closely with Dr. Chen to develop a special program for couples preparing for their wedding dances. Her experience as both a therapist and Marcus's wife gave her a unique perspective that helped many couples. "I have a surprise for you," Marcus said as they finished their dance. He wheeled over to his bag and pulled out an envelope. Inside was a letter from a major medical technology company. They wanted to partner with the First Dance Foundation to develop more affordable robotic braces. The new design would be lighter, easier to use, and most importantly, less expensive. "This means we could help even more couples," Keisha exclaimed, her eyes shining with happy tears. "And that's not all," Marcus added with a grin. He pulled out another envelope. This one contained an invitation to speak at a national conference on adaptive technology. They would be the keynote speakers, sharing their story with doctors, therapists, and researchers from around the country. As they celebrated their good news, Keisha's phone buzzed with a text from Lisa. She had just received another video from a couple they had helped. The bride and groom had recreated Keisha and Marcus's first dance at their own wedding. "Our love story isn't just ours anymore," Marcus said thoughtfully, watching the video. "It belongs to everyone who needs hope, who needs to believe in miracles." Keisha leaned down to kiss him softly. "But the best part of the story is still ours," she whispered. "Every day with you is better than the last." That evening, they danced again in the hotel's garden, under the same stars that had witnessed their wedding dance. Their movements were stronger now, more confident, but the love in their eyes was exactly the same. They had shown the world that true love knows no barriers, and their story would continue to inspire others for years to come.